So after Crash Team Racing Nitro Feud comes out, what can we expect for the next Crash game? With a very special guest, we're going to discuss this right now.
I got hot sauce in my bag, swag.
Before we get started, I just want to highlight today's fan art. So this fan art comes from someone named Kiko, and they actually made something truly badass here. They made a 3D model of Metal Duckles. Like, oh my gosh, this is actually like breathtaking. I love this. And they made two different images. They're both of the same model, but in different lighting. So I'm showing them both here right now. And yeah, this just looks so badass. I love it so much. So thank you so much to Kiko. I really do appreciate it.
Hello there, beautiful human. My name is RidersDX, and welcome to my channel, where today we're going to be talking a little bit about what we think the next Crash Bandicoot game will be like, and I actually have a special guest with me. Please give a warm welcome to DaveAce. Say hi to the spongy people, Dave.
Hello, spongy people.
Yeah, something I started like doing recently because I just love the word spongy. So
Yeah, I get you.
So here's how the video is gonna go. So Dave and I decided to collab on this because in terms of like the next Crash Bandicoot game, there's actually like a lot of different ways we can go about seeing what it might be like, but there's two really big ways the next Crash Bandicoot game would be like. And one way would be a Crash Bandicoot game kind of like the Insane Trilogy. So taking that gameplay from the Insane Trilogy and just making a brand new game out of that. You know, just kind of sticking to what worked in the past and then just making a game based off of that. Or you can have the other direction, which was a game more like Crash Twinsanity. So Crash Twinsanity kind of introduced more open world aspects to the Crash universe, and that was kind of done as like a possible direction for Crash games in the future back then. But of course, like Crash Twinsanity had pretty mixed reception when it came out, so it didn't seem like the developers really went further along with that. But it's definitely seen like a resurge in popularity recently. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, Dave, but I've definitely seen a lot of people showing a lot more love for Crash Twinsanity compared to before.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen the spike. It is kind of interesting because Twinsanity, when it first released, I know there was a lot of people that didn't like it, and me personally, I always felt that Twinsanity was the more so underrated Crash Bandicoot game when it came out.
I completely agree with that. You know, Crash Twinsanity was like my first Crash game, so it just has a very special place in my heart in terms of, you know, how I feel about it compared to other Crash games. But how these videos are going to work now is I'm actually going to argue for why the next Crash game should be more like the Insane Trilogy, and Dave is going to argue in his video, which I'll leave a link to in the description box below, why the next game should be more like Crash Twinsanity. So format of this video is that I'm gonna just go through like an idea of what I think the next Crash game would be like, and if it were to stick to the Insane Trilogy gameplay, and then Dave and I would kind of talk about at the end why or why not this should be the next gameplay for the next Crash game. And then when you go to Dave's video, he's going to talk about his ideas for what the next Crash game would be like if it adopted the gameplay of Crash Twinsanity, and then we'll kind of have a similar discussion like at the end of his video too as to why the Twinsanity gameplay should or should not be the next game. Okay, so I'll just get right into it. So before I kind of start talking about why I think this gameplay should be the next Crash game, I'm just going to kind of go through my basic idea. It's really not that complicated. I just kind of want to add some ideas as to what the next Crash game would be like if they decide to take this gameplay and make that the focus of the next Crash game. So obviously we're very familiar with the gameplay of the Insane Trilogy. It's very linear in its fashion. You know, you enter a level, jump on a bunch of crates and get lots of Wumpa fruit, you know, do this really intricate platforming, which has been very frustrating at times. But yeah, the whole goal is to just get to the end as quick as possible, trying to keep all your lives, and it's definitely developed a reputation in the gaming industry. And I keep talking about this over and over again in my Crash videos, but the Insane Trilogy sold over 10 million copies, so it's very clear that people are here for this gameplay style. So with there not being that many options left in terms of remakes, Activision is probably going to head into at least a lot of discussions about what the next Crash game would be like, and if they were to use this gameplay style as the next Crash game, there's a bunch of different things they could do to kind of like make it a little bit more fresh but still retain that core gameplay that people really love. One of my first ideas, actually, we're going to talk about like the hub worlds. So, you know, in all three original Crash games, they have these really tiny like hubs to kind of go between different levels. I was thinking maybe in the next possible step would be to just expand them a little bit. And I'm gonna refer to the hub worlds in Sonic Unleashed as kind of like a point of reference. So I like those hub worlds, and I know this is a mixed opinion. If you all don't like those hub worlds, then let me know in the comment section below, because I think it'd be an interesting discussion. But I personally like those hub worlds because they were very small, they were very compact. It was easy to get to the next level. I mean, sometimes it gave you a little bit too many tasks to get to the next level, but I think with Crash, it would just be a matter of getting from one location to the next in terms of the hub world. So it could be the same amount of space. I mean, you could have some like extra missions here and there to kind of flesh out the game a little bit, but there should always be like an easy way of getting from point A to point B. And I just think that'd be a really fun way to kind of add a little bit more exploration into the game without like compromising the main gameplay style that people really like about Crash. And another really big thing about Crash Bandicoot is that people love to speed run the game, and so I think that it'd be a really cool idea to have an online component to the game as well, because time trial mode is already a really big thing in Crash Bandicoot. And so I think just incorporating like an online component to it would be really cool. You know, have online 2-player racing maybe, or you know, just racing against people's ghosts on the leaderboards and all that, as long as no one cheats, because that's always the concern with online racing is cheating. And as long as they can kind of like deal with that, then that should be okay. But yeah, I just think that'd be a really cool like thing to incorporate into the game as well. And you can kind of make a way of getting to that in the adventure fields maybe, or having it in the menu option, you know, whichever the developers feel like doing. Let me just talk about something I want to do to the gameplay in particular, because I think it's really important to make sure that this gameplay stays relatively similar to the Insane Trilogy, especially if it's like the first new Crash game since, I don't know, like Mind Over Mutant. I think that's the newest Crash game, is besides Insane Trilogy. I think what would be a really cool thing is to make it so you have more than one playable character. So of course Crash would be like the main playable character, but I think adding Coco and Crunch into the mix would be a really cool idea. And so I would imagine all 3 characters would be able to play through all the same levels, kind of similar to how Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles were able to play in the Genesis games. And so like they all would be able to get through the level. They would all just have like different abilities that allow them to access different pathways in the game. So like Coco is a very technical person, so maybe she can kind of like build things in the level and access new pathways that way. And she could be a little bit more technical and be a little bit easier to do in platforming, but she wouldn't be the strongest person either. So maybe her attacks might not be as wide-ranging, I guess. I don't know. This is just me thinking out of my head. Whereas Crunch is a very strong character, so Crunch would be able to take more damage from enemies, but he would also feel heavier, so platforming with him might feel a little bit more difficult because he's a little bit of a heavier character. And I think those are just some ways to make them a little bit different and, you know, put in some fan service in terms of making sure that like we have more characters that we can play with, but not compromising the gameplay. I think what would be really cool is that once you finish the game or like finish the final boss, you could have the option of switching between the characters within the actual levels, you know, maybe in like a Sonic Heroes type of fashion where you just click on like a button or two and switch between Crash, Coco, and Crunch and be able to like do whatever you want in all the levels. Kind of make sure you get all like the hidden gems, for example, or the hidden like secrets and all that. So I think it'd just be a really cool incentive to keep playing the game beyond the final boss. Now, in terms of the story, with the first 3 Crash games, there definitely was a story to them, but they were never too complex. And you know, Crash Bandicoot stories in general have never been that complex, so I didn't really want to put too much thought into the story. I think just having a basic outline of why Crash is here going through all these levels is all you really need. And I think a good idea might be, this is just an idea, if you have your own ideas of what you think the story would be like, then let me know down in the comment section below as well. I'll be really interested in hearing them. But a cool idea might be to have Cortex team up with various villains throughout the entire series, so not just the old classic ones like Ripperoo, Dingo Dio, maybe Embryo. I don't know if Embryo would actually work with Cortex. It depends. But and there's also like Nitrous Oxide, Nina Cortex, you know, a bunch of these different enemies, and they could all like be conquering specific parts of the planet. And as Crash, you would want to go to these specific parts, complete all the levels within that specific area in the game, and then finally get to the final boss, and then you would have conquered that part of the level per se. And that's basically what I'm thinking about in terms of the story. You know, it'd just be a really cool way to include a bunch of different enemies, you know, giving some more fan service to the people that are playing this game. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of like my idea for the next Crash game, if we were to stick to this classic style. Dave, any thoughts?
Sounds good. Sounds all good to me. Before we get to the the debate section, I really enjoy the idea. I think your idea has a lot of things that could be built off of and actually make it into the next Crash game. I mean, it's a bit far-fetched coming from a fan idea, but it might just be something that the team working on Crash now would be interested in incorporating if they were to go through with the same kind of style that they did with the trilogy.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe some things like having multiple characters. I think that would be a really easy thing to do, especially because Coco is already a playable character in the Insane trilogy. So I feel like something like that at least wouldn't be too far-fetched.
Yeah.
But I'd be really interested in hearing what like the story would be like. So now we're gonna kind of go into the discussion part of the video and kind of talk about why this gameplay style should be the next game versus why it shouldn't. So I guess I'll just start off with like a bullet point I have here in terms of like why I think this gameplay style, from the perspective of what would be best for the franchise, why this would be the best gameplay style to go with. So I think that this gameplay style would be the best thing to kind of go with because, you know, Crash is in like a really great state right now, right? Like he's riding off a lot of hype from like all these different remakes. Like the Insane trilogy, like I said before, sold over 10 million copies. And Crash Team Racing looks like it's going to be like a really successful game as well. You know, just kind of judging from like all the hype around it and like the pre-order numbers I've been seeing, like it definitely looks like Crash is definitely at an all-time high. And so I think like why mess with something that's already working? I think especially with the very first Crash game, I think it's vital to kind of make sure you carry that momentum into the new games. And I think the safest way to go about it is to just take what was working before and just build upon it a little bit and then maybe save the experimentation for later in the future. And plus, like, even though we did have the Insane trilogy, these were all like the same levels, you know? It wasn't as if they were brand new levels that we were getting for the very first time, with the exception of Future Tense, which was a really fun level from what I've seen. But we haven't actually gotten like new levels in this gameplay style. So I also think it'd just be a really cool way to give fans more new content to play with this gameplay style. What do you think about that, Dave?
Well, I do agree. All right, I will full-heartedly say that I do agree with what you're saying. You know, your idea. It's definitely something that I can see more possible than the Twinsanity kind of thing happening. Because, like you said recently, Crash is in the state of coming back, so it makes sense for them to stick to this formula that they've already developed for him and reintroduce him to the audience with this brand new formula that sort of akins back to the classic trilogy before testing and coming out with other gameplay styles. But the main reason why I feel like Twinsanity or something similar to Twinsanity should come out of Crash a couple of years maybe, I mean, it's obviously not going to be something that you're going to see within the next Crash game, the next few Crash games. But the reason I feel like that should be the next kind of gameplay style they'll try and tackle is because not only do they have the nostalgia factor for them when it comes to remaking the trilogy and Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled being the next remake, I feel like if they were to, I don't know, I feel like it should be more experimental to see if people would be interested in an open world type of gameplay style like Twinsanity had, because as you were talking in the beginning of this video, how a lot of people have been coming back and saying that, oh, Twinsanity was a good game. I really like Twinsanity. I feel like if they did a remake of Twinsanity or something similar to Twinsanity, it could possibly have the same results that the trilogy got. Maybe not as many sales when it comes to 10 million, because obviously not everyone will like an open world type of game. But I feel what makes Twinsanity stand out more than the trilogy right now, it's really hard to debate between these two, because we're talking about two different eras that came from Crash.
Definitely.
And Twinsanity, even though the gameplay aspect wasn't all that great and there were a lot of people that hated it, didn't really grow into it, the thing that kept Twinsanity more interesting was the story aspect, the comedy aspect of it, because of how comedic and funny it was. It made people want to keep going because there were so many different references back towards the trilogy and previous games, such as the cutscene where Cortex interacts with the penguins and he's talking talking about how Wrath of Cortex didn't go so well. So
Oh, that was hilarious.
yeah, I thought that was very funny. In a sense, Twinsanity or games similar to Twinsanity could still have the same effect, in my opinion, because they'll not only use gameplay to the best of their ability when it comes to an open world game, but also they have that comedic factor where they could just call back towards games, and then even maybe have flashbacks, cutscenes, and flashbacks to previous games that we didn't see happen, but we know what they're talking about. And that's basically my argument for why I feel like Twinsanity or a game similar to Twinsanity should be the next kind of goal, given that I don't even think the team has much of a goal for Crash.
Wasn't there some kind of, like, I don't know if you noticed, but I heard somewhere that Activision like said that they had like a 5-year plan for Crash or something like that. Not sure you heard anything like that, have you?
I can't remember. They may have said that when they introduced or reintroduced Crash, or was on the announcement of the Insane Trilogy getting announced. But I'm interested either way to see where they're gonna take it. Right now, it just feels like they're focusing on remakes and seeing, what kind of niche the fan base has at the Twinsanity remake or something similar to Twinsanity, or make another game that's completely original and becomes the true Crash 4, because Wrath of Cortex wasn't all that great.
I actually like ordered it because I haven't played it before. So I ordered it and it's gonna be shipping here in like a week or two. So I'm definitely gonna try that out and see how I feel about it. But it just doesn't seem like something I'm gonna enjoy from what I've seen of it, because it looks like the focus isn't really on Crash himself. But that's another topic for another video. Yeah, you make some good points. I honestly do think that like Twinsanity is an interesting direction, for the Crash franchise. I mean, I made a whole video about why Crash Twinsanity should get a remake. Basically, my thoughts about it is just like, I think that like Crash is in such a high point right now. I think it just makes more sense to kind of continue with the Insane Trilogy gameplay for now, and then maybe think about expanding more upon that in the future, especially because I heard that the Future Tense level that Vicarious Visions made got a lot of good reception. I have yet to play it, but I heard that there's a lot of good reception over it, so it definitely shows me that they could make like a brand new Crash game with this gameplay mechanic. So that's another reason why I think it's just smarter and easier to just stick with that gameplay style for now, and then see what happens in the future. But okay, do you have any other thoughts about like the original Insane Trilogy gameplay?
Oh no, I have no thoughts, but I will say that I did play the Future Tense level, and I can say that they crafted that very well.
Okay.
It's got the right amount of difficulty. Crash, if it's one thing that the trilogy relied on when it came to level design, it was difficulty.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
So, I mean, they hit that nail with the hammer correct.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a difficulty spike, but at the same time, it's such a good level.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying my best to finish Crash 1 first, but my gosh, I think like there's just something about it. It's just like really, really hard to get through, and I get discouraged so easily. But
well, that being the first Crash game, I can see, and that's another thing that I've noticed. A lot of people would completely skip the first game and go to Crash 2 or Crash 3 just because of how much more difficult Crash 1 is. But it was the developers' first time handling Crash. They didn't know what they were gonna do.
Exactly. And like they even cut out a whole level because it was too hard.
Stormy
apparently.
Ascent, it was too hard. And then they brought that back in the Insane Trilogy because they knew how to get the formula to work.
Funny enough, when I plugged in Insane Trilogy for the first time, I was trying to figure out where the next level was. I actually went to Stormy Ascent and started playing that, and I was just like, what the is this? This is like not a second level.
This is this is like, I could only imagine you're just sitting here like, okay, we went from tutorial level to, well, here we go. Crash Bandicoot.
I think it's just so funny that was just unlocked from the start, which I'm glad they did, I guess, instead of trying to actually plug it back into the main campaign, because that was part of the main campaign.
I mean, that was originally intentionally supposed to be the last level that you went through before you got the Cortex. So technicality, it was supposed to be a part of the main campaign.
Yeah, not the level I played right after the tutorial level.
Yes.
But okay, I'm thinking we're gonna wrap up this discussion, and then we're gonna go over to your video actually and talk about what your idea is for the next Crash game if it were to incorporate more elements from the Twinsanity game. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you all like collabs like this, then let me know, and I'll try to do more of them in the future. Make sure you thank Dave for coming over to the video. You know, thanks so much for doing this with me. I'm looking forward to hearing what your idea is. But yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to my channel if you like videos like these and you want to see more in the future. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch, and also join my Discord server, which is called the Spongy Garden. This is Riders, and that's Dave, and we're riding out.
Bye-bye.